For the first time since Texas's measles outbreak at the start of the year, no new reported cases. The state health commissioner coming up on today's Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. We'll hear about the fight against measles, far from won, but good signs and some lessons learned. A ramp-up of immigration enforcement in Texas. We'll hear the latest. Flag football helping to tackle a gender gap in youth sports, getting a boost in Texas from none other than the NFL. Also, new warning labels coming to a bag of chips near you. We'll catch up on a vegetable caught in a squeeze with Mexico concerning tariffs. We'll have the week in politics with the Texas Tribune and a whole lot more when the Texas Standard gets underway. Right after this. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on the 6th day of June. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm David Brown. Attention, Texas Doritos fans, Cheetos aficionados, and M&M munchers. Warning. This product contains an ingredient that is not recommended for human consumption by the appropriate authority in Australia, Canada, the European Union, or the United Kingdom. Soon, that label will be appearing on many snack foods in Texas under a sweeping nutrition bill passed in the legislative session, which wrapped up earlier this week. You know, this wouldn't be the first time a state has gone above and beyond federal labeling requirements. If you've ever lived in California, you may recall warnings about products containing suspected carcinogens, labels which you won't see elsewhere in the U.S. by and large. But starting in 2027, similar warnings will be mandatory in Texas for all food and drinks that contain additives like food color, bleached flour, and other chemicals most of us can't spell or pronounce unless your vocabulary includes words like dimethylamylamine or canthaxanthin. Words clearly not in my vocabulary. The Consumer Brands Association represents U.S. food manufacturers. They're urging the governor to veto the bill, which also includes new requirements for physical activity and nutrition education in schools. We're going to have more of a deep dive into what the ledge did and didn't do this session in a few minutes, but this is a story we're continuing to watch here at the Standard. Speaking of health-related stories we continue to track, there's that measles outbreak, which has been centered in far west Texas, setting off alarms at the start of this year. According to the latest numbers the state's posted online, or at least I should say the latest ones that I've seen, 742 cases have been confirmed since late January. This is an increase of 4 cases since the previous count update at the end of May. To get us up to speed on the latest, we're joined by Dr. Jennifer Shuford, the Commissioner of the Texas Department of State Health Services. Dr. Shuford, welcome back.
Thank you. It's always great to be here.
Always great to have you. Now, I said that that 742 number was the latest I've seen, but I gather that you folks will have an update today?
We will have an update today, and thankfully we are not seeing increases over that number. So as of right now, that's the number we'll be posting again today. It's the first time I think that we've put an update on our website where we haven't seen increased case counts over that interval of website updates.
And you've been doing these updates, what, about every 3 to 5 days, something like that?
Exactly, yes. And so we are happy to see those case counts start to stabilize at a low level.
Does this mean that we've reached the peak, that we're now on the downward side of the curve, or is it too early to know?
We appear to be at the downward end of this curve for this particular outbreak in West Texas. We know that there is lots of measles transmitting all over the United States and around the world. And so it just takes one person to get into an under-vaccinated community to cause another outbreak. But thankfully, this large outbreak that we've been tracking in West Texas does seem to be on the decline.
I know there have been occasionally cases reported in other parts of Texas. I know that there sometimes has been a bit of a stir in the local media in different cities. Like someone has traveled to San Antonio. The San Antonio press picks up on it because they were known, or suspected to be carriers of measles. Should we presume that was tied to the West Texas outbreak? And what about that? Do people still need to be on guard, or how are you reading all of this?
So there were several cases in 2025, especially earlier, where we could trace those cases directly back to international travel. Oh. And so those were travelers. They came back to Texas, and we knew where that measles case came from. Since then, we have had more cases where we can't trace it back. It's in somebody who's not in West Texas that didn't have international travel. And so those are called broken chains of transmission. And so we think that a lot of those actually are related to the outbreak in West Texas, and we're just not able to track it back. Measles is so contagious, and it can hang in the air for 2 hours after a person has been in a space. Wow. And so it is hard for us to always know who passed measles to whom.
Is it clear which public health interventions were the most successful in trying to address the outbreak?
You know, it depends on kind of what your measure of success is. We know that vaccines are the most effective way to prevent infection and to prevent transmission. And so we focus a lot on vaccination. And we have been able to increase vaccines all across the state during this time period with messaging that's been pushed out by our agency, but also local health departments and healthcare providers all across the state. Mm-hmm. However, there are some people that really don't want to get that measles vaccine. And in those cases, our messages have been to get to a physician or to the hospital early if there's warning signs of severe disease. And so in those cases, we're just trying to keep people from getting really sick and dying from measles.
I know it's become a major part of the national news narrative to note that the area where the disease appeared to hit hardest is home to a Mennonite community with one of the lowest childhood vaccination rates in the country. And of course, there's another strand of this narrative, which is vaccine skepticism, that sort of thing. Yes. What has Texas learned? What have experts here in Texas learned or been reminded of when it comes to how to deal with infectious diseases like measles?
We understand the importance of building relationships with communities and staying in contact with them over time. And sometimes we haven't been great at that. And so really trying to strengthen our messaging at all times, and so that we already have a relationship with different communities. The vaccines are just such an instrumental way for us to maintain a healthy society that can be productive. And so we'll continue to try to get that message out.
Dr. Jennifer Shuford is the commissioner of the Texas Department of State Health Services. Dr. Shuford, thanks so much for joining us again on the Texas Standard. Hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's get back to the 89th Texas Legislature. Ending its 140-day sprint earlier this week, lawmakers set Texas's budget for the next 2 years, passed some of their top priority legislation, but they didn't pass all of it. In fact, representatives in the Texas House and Senate filed nearly 9,000 bills this session. Only around 1,200 made it to the governor's desk. Just shy of 14% of all the bills filed actually passed, if you're doing the math. Despite the jubilation of a job well done, Texas Newsroom's Nina Banks reports some lawmakers are now mourning what might have been with their dead bills.
Some bills never go anywhere. Others make it to a committee but are stalled to be heard on the House or Senate floor. Some move in one chamber but die in the other. Dead, yes, but forgotten, never. The death of a bill is just an occupational hazard for lawmakers. Still, it doesn't soften the blow. Take Representative John Rosenthal, a Houston Democrat. Way back in November, he filed a bill that would stop marriage licenses from being issued to minors. That bill stopped short on the Senate floor.
Well, the fact that my personal favorite passed off the House floor died in the Senate, I'm sad about that.
This was Rosenthal's fourth session in the House. It was the second for Representative Caroline Harris Davila, a Round Rock Republican. At the end, she says she always thinks of the bills that didn't quite make it over the finish line.
One of those is more transparency in lobbying in the building and for different people. I think we had, I think you've heard of the taxpayer-funded lobbying bill, and I would love to see more progress towards that next session.
Another much talked about bill that died in the 89th legislature was HB 186, which would have banned minors from using social media. The bill made it pretty far before it missed a key deadline late in session. Its author, Republican House Representative Jared Patterson of Frisco, lamented its death on social media, calling it the biggest disappointment of his career. Patterson wrote that he'd, quote, felt the weight of an entire generation of kids who've had their mental health severely handicapped as a result of the harms of social media. Representative Venton Jones, a Dallas Democrat, lost a few bills he filed this session, but he told the Texas Newsroom he was especially sad about one in particular.
HB 50. That was a bill that would work to improve HIV testing across our state by making sure that if a person went to their doctors to get screened for STIs, that an HIV test would be offered as a part of STI screenings.
Jones is the first openly HIV-positive member of the Texas House, but he says he's not going to give up.
While that bill didn't make it this legislative session, I'm going to keep on trying, keep on working to make sure that we're improving, healthcare access and all the other issues we have to work on for our state as we move into the interim in the next session.
On both sides of the aisle, lawmakers can agree that a bill they've spent their time on only to never see the light of day is devastating. But luckily, they've got some time to prep for the future. Lawmakers' next regular session isn't until 2027. Until then, they can work to get their legislation off the cutting room floor and freshen up for next time. I'm Nina Banks in Austin.
Social media editor Wells Dunbar with today's first peek at the talk of Texas. Welcome back, Wells.
Howdy, David. Well, if you haven't heard about it already, maybe you should count yourself among the lucky ones. I'm talking about Elon Musk and Donald Trump appearing to have a nasty falling out online. The drama unfolding where else but on Musk's X platform, formerly Twitter, where Musk, irked by the spending in the Trump administration's budget proposal, said the president would have never been elected without his help. He even accused Trump of appearing in the so-called Epstein files, documents on the disgraced financier and sex trafficker the government is said to possess but have not been made public. Trump, for his part, threatening to take away Musk's government contracts, tweeting, the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it. Well, you better believe there are plenty of reactions online to this story, David. I'll be back with some of those and other stories from the internet later in the show.
Wells Dunbar back in about 35. A new report says senior immigration enforcement officials are urging rank-and-file officers to get creative. What does that mean? The latest on immigration crackdowns in Texas and beyond as the Texas Standard continues, coming up on 19 minutes past the hour.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Galveston Historical Foundation, celebrating Juneteenth. As Juneteenth's birthplace, visitors can explore exhibits, tours, and events honoring the legacy of freedom all month long. More at galvestonhistory.org/Juneteenth2025. Support for Texas Standard comes from St. Edward's University graduate programs in business, leadership, analytics, counseling, and nursing. Flexible online, hybrid, and in-person options. More at stedwards.edu/grad2025.
Business and your money on the Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Not your money, I guess, but Taylor Sheridan's. The Texan behind TV's Yellowstone and its franchises just bought a steakhouse. Not any old steakhouse, but one the Kron's food writer calls one of Texas's oldest temples of steak. Cattleman's Steakhouse in the Fort Worth Stockyards District opened in 1947. It's been undergoing not just physical but menu renovations recently, and according to the Kron, will feature a members-only dining section accessible by private elevator. And for the rest of us, a patio for live music that will feature a lineup curated by Sheridan. Right now, you can still eat at Cattleman's while renovations continue, though they're expected to be complete soon. If you want to apply for that fancy membership, you can do that too. They start at $3,000 annually with a one-time initiation fee of $1,000. And you're listening to the Texas Standard. U.S. immigration enforcement officers have been told by higher-ups to increase the number of arrests they make, even if that means detaining what officials refer to as collaterals. The ramp-up in arrests was set to begin last weekend. That's according to reporting in The Guardian from Jose Olivares. Jose, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
Your story quotes emails from senior ICE officials urging rank-and-file officers to, quote, turn the creative knob up to 11 when it comes to making arrests. Can you talk about that directive? What do we think it means?
That's right. So these emails came on May 31st, right? It was a Saturday, May 31st. And it was top-level ICE management officials instructing their officers to essentially increase the arrest numbers. I mean, I think generally weekends tend to be a slower day for ICE enforcement in general. So they were really pressuring officers to increase the number of arrests throughout the weekend. And the emails are pretty jarring because in particular, there's one ICE manager who says, we complained for the last 4 years about not being allowed to do our job. Now the time has come for us to step up. But what's happening here is a significant escalation by the Trump administration directing ICE management to really increase the number of arrests taking place. Now, the Trump administration has said that they want to arrest 3,000 people per day, which would end up being 1 million people per year, which is a significant escalation. But there are a lot of questions that are taking place here. When it comes to the question of arresting what the administration calls collaterals, this then opens up Pandora's box, dealing with Fourth Amendment issues, warrantless arrests, arresting people without warrants. A lot of questions, a lot of concerns by advocates of potential racial profiling and discrimination, and also the possibility of, within this dragnet involving and arresting U.S. citizens as the numbers continue to increase.
Well, you mentioned the weekend and how things tend to be a little slower on the weekend. I guess I'm surprised by that. I mean, is it just the number of officers on duty, or is it the tactics they take? And is this directive really trying to change that?
That's right. Yeah. So typically, a lot of the ICE enforcement does happen during the weekdays because that's when most officers want to be working. Officers want to take their weekend off and be with families, et cetera. And so a lot of the enforcement actions do take place on weekdays. And so this recent pressure over the weekend is something that is a little bit newer for the administration. They are pressuring ICE officers to work on weekends, work extended hours, just to kind of really ramp up those numbers as much as possible to make these sort of quotas that the Trump administration is pushing for. But what's interesting to note about everything that we're seeing going on is that we're also seeing a bit of a divide within ICE itself because of this. We're seeing top management officials who really believe in the mission of the Trump administration, really believe in the mission of mass deportation that the Trump campaign ran on. But we're seeing this divide within the agency itself. When you have overworked officers, you have special agents that have been delegated to do this immigration enforcement work that are starting to kind of be a little upset and be a little frustrated because they're saying, we're being stretched thin. 3,000 people per day is not really doable. We're getting a little bit upset about this, right? The other question that comes into play when it comes to these emails that we saw over the weekend is this question of warrantless arrests, of arresting what they call collaterals. And again, this brings up some significant Fourth Amendment issues. A lot of this has been challenged in court. There are current court processes going on that are challenging ICE's, arrest of people without warrants. And so I think that's something that we're going to continue to be seeing as the Trump administration continues with this push.
These directives are pretty new, just sent over this past weekend. Do we know if more people were detained by ICE officers after the emails and if the directives are still in place?
The directives are certainly still in place. It's difficult to understand and to know exactly how the numbers keep changing, right? I think when we saw under the first few weeks of the Trump administration is we saw the Department of Homeland Security very publicly publish numbers and saying, we arrested X number of people today, we arrested Y number of people today. But I think it's hard now because the Department of Homeland Security isn't publishing those numbers as frequently as they were before. And it's also just hard to kind of know and really fact check an agency, the Department of Homeland Security that really has been pushing a lot of propaganda forward, has been putting out falsehoods, has been putting out and promoting lies, has been actively defying Supreme Court orders. So I think, the numbers that do come out, when they do come out, which is rare, I think it's important to kind of take those with a grain of salt and be a little bit critical and try to fact check those as much as possible and backtrack. And there's some really great researchers who are independently trying to verify arrest numbers, detention numbers throughout the country.
Well, and I don't know if you've got an answer to this one, but have you heard from the Trump administration? Have they responded to your reporting?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is the Trump administration continues to push this question and push this point that they're arresting what they call criminal aliens, illegal aliens, criminals. But what this reporting is showing is that for ICE now, everyone is fair game, right? I think it's important to note, and I think it's really, really important to underscore that being undocumented in the U.S., being in the U.S. without proper authorization, it's not a crime. It's a civil offense. It's a civil infraction. Crossing the border illegally, or if you get deported and then you cross again, those are crimes. But just simply being undocumented in the U.S. is a civil offense. It's not a crime, right? And so what we're seeing this push to arrest people without warrants, without active warrants, that just happen to be in a place where other people are being arrested, right? And so that does kind of raise a lot of questions for people who may not have any sort of criminal background or any sort of criminal history that are being rounded up in this. And so when I reached out to the Trump administration, when I reached out to the Department of Homeland Security, they did respond with a very sarcastic response, but essentially continuing to promote this idea that they're only going after criminals, when in fact, just by the very nature of warrantless arrests, of collateral arrests, it just shows that they're not. They're also targeting people without any sort of criminal backgrounds.
Jose Olivares is a New York-based reporter for The Guardian. We'll have a link to his reporting at texasstandard.org. Jose, thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
New reporting from CBS indicates ICE has arrested 100,000 people since the beginning of the Trump administration. We'll have more details during the Talk of Texas later in the program.
Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas College Savings Plan, administered by the state of Texas. Families can save for tuition, room and board, books, and other qualified education expenses at eligible schools nationwide. Learn more at texascollegesavings.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. Police in San Antonio now say it was premature to rule out hate as a motive in the shooting death of actor Jonathan Joss. He was killed earlier this week, with Joss's husband saying it was because of his sexual orientation. San Antonio Police Chief William McManus updated the investigation by walking back his previous comments that there was no evidence the shooting was a hate crime.
That was way, way, way premature. Shouldn't have done it. It was way too soon before we had any real information.
Joss is best known for his role as the voice of John Redcorn on King of the Hill. The longtime head of the Texas prison system is retiring. Thursday's announcement said Brian Collier is stepping down in August after more than 40 years at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The Texas Newsroom's Lauren McGaughy has more.
Brian Collier has held almost every job at the state prison agency: clerk, correctional officer, parole officer, and eventually executive director. He spent nearly a decade as the agency's head, leading it through Hurricane Harvey and COVID-19, including criticisms faced over its pandemic response. At least 190 people incarcerated by the state died with COVID, including those who should have been released on parole. Last fall, he testified in federal court to defend the agency's response to the lack of air conditioning behind bars. Most state lockups lack AC, and Collier acknowledged temperatures inside during the summer could be high, but he denied that heat was killing people. That case heads to trial later this year. I'm Lauren McGaughy in Austin.
The U.S. Supreme Court has unanimously dismissed Mexico's lawsuit against American gun manufacturers, ruling that federal law protects the industry from liability. Stefania Corpi has more.
Mexico argued that companies like Smith & Wesson knowingly enabled trafficking that fuels its gun violence crisis. The Supreme Court ruled that Mexico failed to show manufacturers directly aided illegal gun sales or cartel violence. Justice Legal Keegan wrote that the lawsuit lacked evidence of criminal transactions or intentional wrongdoing by the companies. Mexico cited weapons like the Colt El Jefe and Emiliano Zapata pistol as examples that target a specific Mexican market. Mexican officials vowed to keep pursuing legal action. I'm Stefania Corpi in Mexico City.
The College Softball World Series will be decided tonight after Texas Tech defeated UT yesterday to even the series.
Here's the 0-2. Delivers in the biggest moment.
The final score was 4-3 Red Raiders. The winner tonight will claim the national championship. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. Flag football is a fast-growing sport for girls and women across the nation, and it looks like Texas may be leading the way in many respects. In fact, for the first time ever, two NFL teams, the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans, each sponsored a varsity-level girls flag football league for local high school students. As their respective inaugural seasons drew to a close, Kailey Hunt of KUT in Austin went out to watch some games and learn about the sport's future.
It's a balmy Friday night in May. 17-year-old Kafia Jackson Woods jumps in place with nerves and excitement as she waits to join her team on the field. The track star turned running back from McCallum High School had helped her team secure a spot in Austin ISD's first ever girls flag football championship. Now Jackson Woods and her fellow Knights are about to face off against an undefeated team from Bowie High School.
I feel like if we really try in this game, I feel like we could beat Bowie.
Jackson Woods and her teammates really did try. The team's defense held the top-seeded Bowie Bulldogs to only one touchdown, and Jackson Woods proved to be a key offensive weapon for McCallum. The team's sideline erupted into cheers as she came up with a big catch, only to follow it up by an even bigger run. But in the end, those efforts were not enough. McCallum just could not muster enough momentum to make it into the end zone and put points on the board. Bowie walked away with the win, final score 8-0. Jackson Woods rattled off a list of things her team could have done better in the game before finally taking a breath and saying,
"Being second place in the first ever flag football tournament, I'm really proud. I think we did a really good job."
Her coach, Thomas Gammerdinger, agrees.
You know, you feel disappointed, but I don't think that takes away from, on the whole, how proud of the girls I am and how much fun I had.
Gammerdinger is McCallum's athletic director and head football coach. He volunteered to help coach the school's team after learning the Dallas Cowboys were expanding its girls flag football program to Austin ISD.
I got two little girls. I always wished I would have had a boy so I could coach them in football, but now I might have that opportunity. So I'm super excited. I mean, the girls had a great time. They loved it. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome for everybody involved.
The Cowboys program first launched in Fort Worth in 2022. Since then, it's expanded to include more than 100 high schools across the state. That includes 12 in Austin ISD, says Crystal Victorino, one of the district's area athletic coordinators. She says schools had no trouble recruiting players to try the new sport.
As soon as they heard, I think within 30 minutes we had one full team filled already. There's only 20 spots per school, and within 30 minutes one of our schools had a full roster.
That did not come as a surprise to the Cowboys' youth football development manager, Danny McCrae.
Texas is a football state, right? So I know a lot of the young ladies would always say, hey, why don't we have football? And I'm saying to them now, hey, the opportunity is here.
McCrae, a former Cowboys defensive back, says the addition of flag football to the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles has generated a lot of interest. Dozens of colleges and universities now offer women's flag football as an official sport, giving girls a path to continue their athletic careers and qualify for scholarships. As for McCrae, his interest in the sport is more personal.
It means a lot to me because I have a 4-year-old who likes football because she saw her dad play football, so she sees all my stuff around the house. So now she is playing flag football.
McCrae says one of the program's long-term goals is to make flag football an official varsity sport in Texas. Right now, only 14 states recognize girls flag football at that level. But that could change. Several states have pilot programs to explore sanctioning girls' flag football as an official sport. In Texas, these high school leagues are laying the groundwork to get recognition from the University Interscholastic League, which currently sponsors 14 sports at the high school level.
The goal is to get enough schools playing, enough inspiration and momentum behind it that the UIL says it's so big we need to govern this sport.
McRae and the Cowboys aren't alone in creating that growth. The state's other NFL team, the Houston Texans, expanded its girls' flag football program to the Austin area this spring. Like the Cowboys, the Texans recently hosted an end-of-season tournament for participating schools from the Round Rock, Pflugerville, and Leander school districts. In that league, 16-year-old Landry Smith, a wide receiver and free safety from Rouse High School, helped her team secure the program's first Austin area championship. Smith, who also plays flag football for the 17 and under girls national team, feels like she's gotten a front row seat to the sport's growth in the Austin area.
Representing my school with girls who have never played before and showing them the game and seeing the spark in them grow and them grow the love for the game has been the most memorable thing about this season.
Officials from Austin ISD and Round Rock ISD say there are plans to continue the flag football leagues next school year, giving the Rouse Raiders a shot at winning back-to-back championships and the McCallum Knights a chance for redemption. I'm Kailey Hunt in Austin.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider committed to helping Texas communities and emphasizing safety. More at texasmutual.com/TexansGetIt.
It's not just about the brisket or the ribs or the sausage or even the sides. It's the culture and people who are passionate about it. Where there's smoke, there's Daniel Vaughn, Texas Monthly Barbecue Editor. Join us next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Where There's Smoke comes from H-E-B.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The U.S. trade war with Mexico continues to stew, and America's favorite fruit that thinks it's a vegetable is caught up in the squeeze: tomatoes. Tightening cross-border trade could catch up with consumers with higher prices, but Florida tomato growers say the tariff is necessary. TPR's David Martin Davies reports.
It's another busy lunch at Mi Tierra Mexican food restaurant in San Antonio's historic Market Square, and hot plates are hitting the tables. One ingredient present in every order is the red tomato.
Tomatoes just about in every product that we sell, whether it's for a taco meat and carne guisada, almost every recipe has tomatoes. I'm Pete Cortez, Chief Enchilada Officer, CEO of La Familia Cortez Restaurants.
Cortez said last year his restaurants diced about 200,000 pounds of tomatoes. Every one was grown in Mexico.
From our experience, the tomato that we're able to get from Mexico is frankly superior.
And Cortez is concerned about what an impending tariff on the fruit from Mexico is going to do to his prices.
There's a cause and there's an effect. If the cost of tomato goes up by 25%, then people are going to probably start looking elsewhere.
On July 14th, the United States is set to impose a 21% anti-dumping duty on most fresh tomatoes imported from Mexico. Robert Gunther, vice president of the Florida Tomato Exchange, says this is different from the Trump tariffs.
The reason why it's called an anti-dumping duty versus a tariff is because that the U.S. government has concluded that the Mexican tomato industry has been dumping tomatoes illegally into the United States.
Gunther says over 25 years ago, the Department of Commerce ruled that Mexico was illegally undercutting Florida's tomato growing industry.
They broke the law. They broke the U.S. trade law, and the U.S. government has sided with that.
So none of this makes sense anymore.
Skip Hewlett is the chief legal officer at NatureSweet, a San Antonio-based company specializing in growing, packaging, and selling greenhouse-grown tomatoes, the majority of them grown in Mexico. Hewlett says NatureSweet isn't dumping Mexican tomatoes, selling them below cost. He asked, how then would they stay in business? And he points out that the investigation into Mexico's tomato imports was conducted in 1995 and 96.
Maybe it did in 95 and 96, but they put up an agreement in place that was in one form or another has been there for 30 years to protect the U.S. industry.
But during that time, the U.S. tomato industry has been withering. Its share of the U.S. market has dropped from 80 to 30%.
So we've lost farms, we've lost jobs. Some of the most experienced, dedicated growers in this country have been forced out of business. And that is all because over the last 30 years, there has been a systematic neglect to abide by U.S. trade laws and sell the tomatoes from Mexico at a fair market price.
Hewlett counters by saying Mexico growers are able to produce a tastier tomato in high volume using state-of-the-art greenhouse technology.
The members of the Florida Tomato Exchange are open field. They grow the big tomatoes, gas them red, and consumers have said we really don't like the taste. That's what they're going to provide at a higher cost to the consumer.
Gunther says the 21% duty will not result in higher tomato prices. But Hewlett says Nature's Sweet will have to raise its prices because of the tariff. Tomato, tariff, or duty, consumers might say it's all the same to them, but if it does mean higher prices, they won't be happy. Mexico already isn't happy. They have indicated the possibility of imposing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. meat exports, including chicken and pork, if the tomato duties are enacted. I'm David Martin Davies in San Antonio.
The winner of the 17th Van Cliburn International Piano Competition won't be named until Saturday. But right now, one thing is certain, it will be a man. This isn't unusual in the world of elite piano competitions. Some say the issue isn't sexism, but the size of the instrument itself. KERA's Marquita Fornoff spoke with people who say narrower keyboards could even the playing field.
That's Yanjun Chen performing. She's a 23-year-old pianist from China.
Sometimes I wish I have bigger hands so I could play that. But I have some kind of, find a way to adjust to pieces.
Chen was one of 5 women in this year's crop of 30 Cliburn competitors, but she didn't make it past the semifinals. Only 2 women have ever won the contest. And the Cliburn isn't unusual. The Leeds, Queen Elizabeth, and Sydney piano competitions all have mostly male winners. Some music professionals say pianists with small hands, both men and women, are at a disadvantage. They're advocating for a little-known solution. It's called a stretto piano, and it has narrower keys.
So what we're doing is trying to even the playing field.
Carol Leone is the chair of piano studies at SMU. She has 3 sets of what are called actions in her studio. An action refers to the set of keys and hammers that activate the sound in the piano. They're surprisingly easy to change. It takes about 5 minutes.
So this Steinway right now has an action that has a 6-inch octave from here to here, is 6 inches.
That's half an inch shorter than on a regular keyboard.
Not only can I reach an octave, an eighth, and I can also reach a ninth, and now I can reach a 10th, which is sort of a big deal for pianists to be able to reach a 10th, which I never was in my life able to do that until I got these keyboards.
And next to her on a cart is a stretto with even narrower keys. With it, Leone's hand can span 11 keys. So why aren't more pianists using the stretto?
People just don't know about it.
That's Hannah Ryman. She's a pianist and CEO of Stretto Piano Events.
I think what it will take is some more participation from the manufacturers, and it will take awareness raising.
And narrow keys aren't widely available, which is why the Cliburn doesn't use them in competition, says its CEO, Jacques Marquis.
The Cliburn is there because we're launching careers of young musicians, and the winners will go on a tour for the next 3 years, and we're booking something like 250 to 300 concerts. And we always apply the real-life condition.
And most concert halls aren't going to have strettos. Chen, the Cliburn semifinalist, hasn't played a stretto.
But I'm interested, yeah. Yeah, I was always wondering, like, what if the keyboards are smaller and would I be able to project more sound? I was wondering about this sometimes.
Leonie is eager to show off the Stretto. And she hopes more pianists will have the chance to try them.
There's nothing wrong with an instrument fitting the musician. Pianos with these keyboards are identical in every other way. No one can even tell.
Ryman says the naysayers just aren't familiar with the Stretto.
Once people hear people playing concerts, there's no argument, you know?
I'm Marquita Fornoff in Dallas.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UNT's online master's degree in Advanced Data Analytics program, preparing business professionals to shape the next generation of AI business solutions. More at online.unt.edu/data analytics.
This is Sean Petrie with the Typewriter Rodeo, and we are a group of friends who type poems on the spot on whatever topics people want. This is for listener Megan, Awkward Grass. There it is, peeking up, the start of spring, when all the other blades are stretching out, literally shooting up with growth spurts overnight. And will you look good? Will you sprout strong and sure, or get trampled underfoot? There is no way to know, sweet grassling. The only truth is we all struggle, and we all will bend, but never break. So just keep reaching, however awkwardly, for the sun. This is Sean Petrie, and you're on Texas Standard Time.
You can send us your ideas for Typewriter Rodeo poems on the Contact Us page, texasstandard.org. Time to check in with the Texas Tribune for a look back at some of the big headlines from the week that was in Texas politics. Joining us today, Kailey Guo, politics reporter at the Tribune. Kailey, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Still unclear whether Governor Greg Abbott's going to sign that Senate Bill 3 into law. This is the measure banning the sale of consumable THC products in Texas, just passed by the Ledge in the just concluded session. Where does Senate Bill 3 stand right now?
Right, so it's been passed by both the House and the Senate before they gavelled out the session on Monday. And so that means it's headed to the governor's desk, but he has not really given any indication of whether or not he would sign it or veto it. There are a couple options. He could sign it into law and then it would become law. This would be a ban on all THC products in the state. He could not sign it and just let it quietly go into law. That happens with a lot of bills, and this one is a bit more contentious, and he might not want to, put his signature on it, but he might also not want to take the active step of vetoing it, which is a third option. He could go ahead and veto it. All of those three options sort of carry their pros and cons. Signing it into law might incur the wrath of people who really don't want it. We've seen a pretty intense pressure campaign on him to veto the bill. We see hemp businesses, farmers, people who rely on it, asking him to veto it. They held a press conference on the day that the legislature was signing out to ask him to veto it. If he does veto it, though, then he could make Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick really angry. This has been one of Dan Patrick's top priorities. He calls it a absolutely necessary step to protect kids from accessing these products. So Governor Abbott hasn't really given any indication of what he might do. And I think we're all going to be looking really closely at if he starts to drop any signs. He has until the 22nd to either to veto it, if that's what he's going to do.
I know it's not just Patrick. It's a lot of parents who are concerned about the availability of those products at gas stations and that sort of thing. Want to shift gears to U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett, who's been making a lot of waves on the national front. She's a Texas Democrat, and apparently she's launching a bid to be chair of the House Oversight Committee. What would that mean?
Yeah. So she's doing that after the top Democrat, Jerry Connolly. He's from Virginia. He died late last month. She is running for this. That would make her the top Democrat on this panel. It's a pretty high profile panel that has usually been responsible for, fighting back against the current administration. In her letter to colleagues announcing her bid, she's argued that she is the best positioned to communicate Democrats' case against President Trump and his administration, to hold him accountable. She said she'd be interested at looking at impeachment charges against him. And so she's making this pitch. There are a few other Democrats in the race, but I believe they're going to choose who will succeed Mr. Connolly later this month. That would position her to, again, be the top Democrat on this panel. And if Democrats win back a House majority in 2026, that she would be the top Democrat on this panel. So yeah, it would give her a platform on top of her already pretty sizable
But she's a relative newcomer, though, to Capitol Hill.
This is true. She is relatively new, but she's certainly made her mark. We've seen a lot of viral moments from her in this committee. She's sort of known for her clapbacks against Republicans and online and also in the committee. So that could be totally used to her advantage to sort of win this perch.
Well, there's a whole lot more that you can check out over at texastribune.org. That's where Kailey Guo covers politics. And we're going to have links and more at texasstandard.org. Kailey, thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much. You as well.
And you were listening to the Texas Standard. Wells Dunbar is monitoring the talk of Texas on this Friday. Wells, welcome back.
Good to be back, David. And in the words of Lori Worth Palmer on our Facebook page, who saw that coming? Everyone did. She says, referring there to the story I was talking about at the top of the broadcast, the spat between part-time Central Texan Elon Musk and President Donald Trump. Trump saying this morning he's in no rush to talk to Musk or make nice. Musk, for his part, seemingly walking back some of his statements, such as that he would decommission his SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, which has been used to take astronauts and supplies to the International Space Station. On our Facebook page, Manuel Garcia says they need a clean break from each other. Musk should never give another dollar to another politician and stay away and out of national politics. There's plenty he can do in Texas, Manuel says. Maybe he could take the high road and genuinely make Texas a little better. Meanwhile, Mike Ricker, also via Facebook, has an interesting historical perspective here. He says, 81 years ago today, Franklin Roosevelt addressed this nation after the invasion of Normandy, and that address took the form of a prayer for our troops and our liberty. His eloquence cemented his legacy and place in American history. I'd like to know if Donald Trump ever pauses to think about how he will be remembered, especially in light of yesterday's events. And speaking, David, of that 81st anniversary of D-Day, June 6, 1944, Ron Bird shares a remarkable fact on our Facebook page regarding none other than the battleship Texas. He notes that when the USS Texas ceased firing at the Pointe at 6:24 a.m., 255 14-inch artillery shells had been fired in 34 minutes. Yeah, incredible. Remarkable to think about there, David.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. I want to loop back to something that one of the earlier commenters said, talking about the Musk and Trump thing. Latest I'm seeing from the New York Times is that Trump wants to return his Tesla now. I'm also seeing it just keeps on some interesting analysis from the Times about don't be surprised if over the next few days we see a rapprochement between the two.
Yeah, a lot of
course, nobody who saw this spat coming, right? I mean, it was just it was one of those, but definitely one that I think a lot of folks are going to be commenting on and watching as we head into the weekend. Alas, we're just about out of time for the big broadcast, and Wells Dunbar continues to monitor the talk of Texas. You can check out all the news, keep up with the news 24/7, as we like to say here, at texasstandard.org. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Kristen Cabrera, Alexandra Hart, Michael Marks, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso is our digital producer. Leah Scarpelli is our director. Casey Cheek is our technical director. We'll be back on Monday. Till then, I'm David Brown. Have a wonderful weekend.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.